Good morning, bears and people, and all of you who want to get yourself out of debt. So good morning to you all. Today I am going to be reading from chapter number 7 of the Financial Matrix and How to Escape It. It's a great quote here to begin the chapter that I really like. It says, "This would be a much better world if more married couples were as deeply in love as they are in debt." And that's a quote by Earl Wilson. It's so true. So I'm going to continue on reading chapter 7. It's entitled Short-Term Denials. In other words, short-term sacrifice. Once they have long-term dreams, a dream to be financially free with ownership and choices, people are ready to implement the second principle every billionaire practices: short-term denials. Learning to deny the urge for instant gratification by focusing on long-term dreams is essential for success in any field. Short-term denial is the ability to resist an immediate, smaller reward and build instead for a larger, more enduring one. While most acknowledge this to be a good principle, few seem to live it. The reason why becomes clear when one remembers that marketers and advertisers receive big money to get people to buy on impulse rather than on logic. This returns us to the discussion on the conscious, the ant mind, and the subconscious, the elephant mind. In order to deny gratification in the short term, a person must program his elephant subconscious mind with the long-term dream he desires. This is vital, for without this step, the marketers will fabricate dreams using their products to replace the mental void caused by a person not dreaming for himself. Marketers are experts at exciting the bored subconscious mind, the elephant mind, to charge off in the distance of counterfeit dreams with debt. Therefore, the real question is, who is programming your subconscious elephant mind? The answer, based upon how few people practice short-term denials, is the marketers who are doing most of your mental programming. This must end if you are to be financially successful. Perhaps the best place to start is to limit the amount of television exposure. Indeed, the average person consumes around 4 to 5 hours of television and media per day. Therefore, the subconscious mind of most people is deluged with images designed to get them to emotionally buy what they cannot afford. Author Eric Kalonius noted the impact such repeated image exposures have on the mind. The researchers found that the subjects liked the pictures they had already seen. Researchers call this the mere exposure effect. That's why advertisers pound ads repeatedly down our throats. It's why chain restaurants, you get the same meal coast to coast, thrive. Not surprisingly, successful advertisers ignore the conscious ant mind and instead focus on the subconscious elephant mind, creating an elephant charge by feeding the subconscious a steady diet of seductive images. Advertisers have learned from experience that providing a list of functions, features, and benefits to the ant mind doesn't produce nearly the results that feeding alluring images to the elephant mind does. Philosopher Dan Dennett describes the subconscious mind as the president, while the conscious mind is just its press secretary. Advertisements encourage the president to buy things on emotion that aren't truly needed, while the press secretary creates a rational reason for the irrational purchase. High-paid marketers, in a nutshell, promise the masses happiness by feeding manufactured images to their subconscious minds. This elicits an unwise purchasing decision by the multitude, which increases profits for companies and pain for people. Wow, is that ever true? Today, with this mass hysteria over the coronavirus, it's just like they're just feeding that elephant mind, the conscious mind, and ignoring the subconscious. Be that as it may, if advertisers seduce our subconscious minds into the financial matrix trap, then people can program their own subconscious mind to escape it. Once I understood that the elephant mind merely charges towards the images it is consistently fed, Lori and I began to control what was fed to our elephant minds. This is one of the keys to freedom from the financial matrix, refusing to be seduced into buying things we cannot afford. Once people assume responsibility for feeding their elephant mind, they are moving toward their long term dreams. As Maxwell Malt explains, we act or fail to act not because of the will, as is so commonly believed, but because of imagination. A human being always acts and feels and performs in accordance with what he imagines to be true about himself and his environment. Remember the verse in Luke that reads, "He that is faithful in that which is least is faithful also in much. And he that is unjust in the least is unjust also in much." And that's from Luke 16:10. This is one of the key ingredients to financial success. The financial fitness program teaches people how to be faithful in their current income so that they have seed money to invest in themselves and their future. Essentially, if people cannot manage their current income, they will prove unfaithful even when or if they make more. For instance, how many stories have we heard about how lottery winners made and lost millions of dollars, eventually being forced to declare bankruptcy? How is this possible? Simply stated, without a solid financial education, making more money can be dangerous. Indeed, banks and credit cards provide more credit to people with higher incomes, basically providing the rope for financially illiterate people to hang themselves. Fortunately, regardless of a person's income level, the financial fitness program teaches specific defensive principles to help them spend less than they make monthly. Moreover, Life offers financial life, and they're talking here about the Life Leadership Company and their financial fitness program. So, moreover, Life offers financial fitness services that allow people to track all expenses uh, and save at thousands of national and local vendors. Be sure to check out the many testimonials of people who have eliminated debt and saved money using the financial fitness services on the Life website. I have a link for that below the stream here, and when I post these on YouTube, I'll have the link to that program as well. This financial fitness services um, program that he's talking about here. I took a subscription to that, and it's really great because it helps you track all your spending. And it has this debt reduction calculator that you plug in all of your debts and your payments and your expenses and everything, and and it gives you 3 different ways that you can budget yourself to get out of debt. And I think one of the ways is like it'll calculate like the smallest debt that you have to the highest debt, and let you knock them off one at a time that way. Or it also has where you put in all of your debts and the interest that you pay on it, so you can choose to pay off like the highest interest one first, and so on and so forth until all your debts are knocked off. Or there's another option where you can combine the two, and it's a combination of the two, and it helps you get out of debt the quickest. So anyway, that's what that one of the financial fitness services things is that he's talking about. It's pretty helpful. Anyway, playing defense, in other words, is vital to restoring financial liberty. For only when people enjoy financial freedom by building a business asset without debt are they truly free from the financial matrix. Robert Kiyosaki created the cash flow quadrant to identify and explain the 4 ways people go on offensive to create cash flow. Each of the 4 quadrants represents a category of income generation, whether it's employee, self-employed, business owner, and investment. And I'm sure a lot of you have already seen that. There's all kinds of videos that Robert has on YouTube and other video platforms where you can pull up the cash flow quadrant, and he explains it all out. And it's pretty interesting, actually. And Orrin and Chris Brady with the Financial Fitness Program, they implement that the cash flow quadrant in their materials as well because it's really effective. Each of the of the quadrants has pros and cons that must be considered when choosing which quadrant to work within. Every reader is in one or more of these quadrants, and it's important to understand how to move from one's current quadrant into the business and investor quadrants in order to escape the financial matrix. In truth, it doesn't matter which quadrant people start in so long as they apply long-term dreams, short-term denials, and long-term duplication to move themselves into the business and investor quadrants. The important principle is to live below your current income to generate the seed money to invest in your business asset and harvest your financial freedom. Okay, so employee quadrant per hour, pros and cons. Repeat after me. If you want to be successful, you need to get good grades and get a good job with benefits, and then you can live the American dream. Anyone ever hear that one growing up? I heard that hundreds of times growing up. A good job in reality does provide a high level of security, at least in a good economy, since employees receive income whether or not they or the company were productive that month. Employees, in short, get paid per hour sold. This leads to predictable levels of income and an easier path with which to develop a solid defensive financial plan. If, however, a person's income varies month to month, it becomes difficult to build an effective defensive plan. Above everything else is a little downside risk if the company fails. In this case, an employee merely gets another job, while the entrepreneur who started a traditional brick and mortar business is typically still responsible for paying back creditors. Indeed, if the business owner cannot handle the debt load, he or she will end up in bankruptcy proceedings. The employee quadrant, in sum, is a great short-term place for people to start their journey to the business and investor quadrants since it provides a steady stream of income. The predictable income allows people to live below their means and to invest the difference into building a business to free themselves from the financial matrix. However, employees who choose to remain employees must also recognize the risk associated with this choice. First, for any people who consider themselves to be hungry, honorable, and honorable, the upside rewards in a job environment are minimal. Pay rises are typically distributed within a small range regardless of each individual's personal contribution. At most, a high achiever may make 5 to 10% more than the average, even though he or she may be contributing 10 times more to the company's bottom line. Long-term employees, in essence, follow a 45-year plan in which incomes level off around 25 years of age and raises barely keep up with the cost of living afterwards. This flat line continues until retirement, when the employees are then forced to make it on 50% or less of the income they already thought wasn't enough when they were working full-time. Interestingly, when I learned about the employee 45-year plan, I was 26 years old. I remember sitting down with my dad to graph it out for him. I showed him how employees pay flat-lined, I showed him how employees pay flatline from around age 25 until age 65 and told him this wasn't working for me. His response, as a 60-year-old retired electrician, was classic. You know what, son? It didn't work for me either. I'm making less than half in retirement of what I made working full time. Sure, this is funny today, but it wasn't when I first heard it. Later, I learned that a person must take advice from someone who has escaped the financial matrix. For how can a person trapped in the financial matrix teach someone else how to escape? My mom and dad gave me the best advice they knew, but they did not know how to escape the financial matrix, and thus could not teach me how to either. I had to admit that I had spent 8 years of my life climbing the ladder that could not take me where I wanted to go. If the definition of insanity is continuing to do the same thing while expecting a different result, I was flirting with insanity. All right, so this next section is the 45-year plan. And they've got a graph here where it shows you begin working and the line goes up and then it goes flat for a number of years until the age of 60. So the graph is at 20 years old, 30 years old, 40, 50, 60, and 70. So at 20, the line starts to go up until you hit about 35, and then it flat lines out from 35 until 65, and then drops halfway down at the age of 65 to 70 and on. So above all, what leads most people out of the E quadrant is when they realize they are at the mercy of the company's leadership for their security and advancement. For example, when I resigned from AC Rochester to start my own consulting company, many told me it was risky. Nevertheless, I felt it was riskier to rely on the company's management for my economic future rather than on my own performance. For the management team's poor decisions didn't just affect them, but everyone else's income, regardless of their personal performance. This is exactly what occurred at our division. The growth had slowed due to bad leadership, and as a 25-year-old 7th level engineer, I was notified that they wouldn't consider promoting me to 8th level, a much sought after level of distinction with perks like a company car within the enormous General Motors hierarchy. They wouldn't promote me to that level until I was 32. The reason for this disappointing news was because the division was going backward, and with the decreasing revenues, they didn't have any spots open regardless of one's performance. 7 years of hard work with no chance for promotion seemed ludicrous to me. Strangely, to most of the engineers, it didn't. After AC Rochester became independent of GM, it tanked, and in the aftermath, tens of thousands of employees, both salaried and hourly, lost their jobs. If the leadership team is poor, in a word, it doesn't matter how good an individual employee is. He will be without a job when the company goes under. This is the biggest danger of remaining an employee in the long term. Self-employed quadrant, per task, pros and cons. Self-employed people are usually those who recognize that there are downside risks and upside limitations associated with the E quadrant and did something about it. This is courageous, and S quadrant income earners ought to be commended for making the entrepreneurial leap. A large benefit of a self-employed business situation is the greater level of control people have over their business and income potential. Self-employed people launch a business based on their specific skills to satisfy customers in the marketplace. Many S quadrant people, like private practice doctors, lawyers, accountants, get paid per service or task. This typically allows them to make more money and have more control over their futures than employees have. Control is important to S quadrant inhabitants, as most of them started a company because they felt more secure controlling their own destiny than relying upon others. Indeed, that is precisely why I left AC Rochester and started my own engineering consulting company. I leveraged the recognition I had received from winning a national technical benchmarking award and the skills I learned through technical benchmarking at AC Rochester to move from the E quadrant to the S quadrant. I felt more secure in my own ability to perform and believe I could build an S business around teaching the benchmarking process to other companies. The next thing I knew, I was traveling around the country, building my own self-employed business model, making more money per hour than I ever had before. Unfortunately, while there are many upsides in the S quadrant, there are also some downsides. For one thing, I discovered that building a big consulting company meant the willingness to travel around the globe. However, with 4 young children at home at the time, I wasn't excited to do this. After all, what's the point of having children if I rarely see them? For another, I realized that in order to make money, I still had to sell my time. I had, in reality, merely traded a dollar per hour job for a dollar per service self-employed business. Regardless of how ambitious I was still caught in the money for time trap. I finally understood why Kiyosaki emphasized never invest in a business where the system goes home at night, because I was a system that went home at night. In other words, the business could only get as big as the amount of hours I was willing to invest, and this limited the success of my and every other S business owner. Finally, I found that in the S quadrant, I went from having one boss as an employee to having numerous bosses, customers, with conflicting agendas. In effect, it became increasingly difficult to satisfy all my customers, and I knew it would only get worse the bigger my business grew. In a sense, moving from the E quadrant to the S quadrant was like jumping from the frying pan into the fire. True, I made more money, but I also increased my time, travel, and responsibilities with no end in sight. S business owners are like barge operators who make money by carrying cars across the river. While they can make good money, they are limited by how many times they are willing and able to drive the barge from one side to the other. Curiously, even though I told everyone I owned my own business, I soon realized the business actually owned me. All right, so the next quadrant is the business owner quadrant per relationship pros and cons. Actually, I think I'm going to end this. I'm going to end this one here and start another one because this business owner quadrant per relationship pros and cons is quite low. It's quite long, and it's going to go into also the investor quadrant, and then a story, an example of a couple who had done this. All right, so I'm going to end this one here and then pick it up in the next one to go over the business owner quadrant. All right, so that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the little slideshow that I put on that you can kind of look at while you're listening. All right, that's it for today. Peace out. I'll see you. I think I'll probably do this business owner quadrant tonight. I'd like to get one chapter a day. There's only three more chapters left, so I want to get this all finished up so we can go on to the practical steps to getting out of debt. All right, so peace out for now, and I'll catch you on the next one.